The Grumman F6F Hellcat was a carrier-based fighter aircraft conceived to replace the earlier F4F Wildcat in United States Navy service. The Hellcat was an erstwhile rival of the faster Vought F4U Corsair for use as a carrier-based fighter. However, the Corsair had significant issues with carrier landing that the Hellcat did not, allowing the Hellcat to steal a march as the Navy's dominant fighter in the second part of World War II. A position the Hellcat did not relinquish. The Corsair instead was primarily deployed to great effect in land-based use by the U.S. Marine Corps. Although the F6F resembled the Wildcat in some ways, it was a completely new design, powered by a 2,000 HP Pratt Whitney R-2800, the same power plant used for both the Corsair and the United States Army Air Force's Republic P-47 Thunderbolt fighters. Some military observers tagged the Hellcat as the Wildcat's big brother. The F6F was best known for its role as a rugged, well-designed carrier fighter which was able, after its combat debut in early 1943, to counter the Mitsubishi A6M0 and help secure air superiority over the Pacific theater. Such was the quality of the basic simple, straightforward design, that the Hellcat was the least modified fighter of the war, with a total of 12,200 being built in just over 2 years. Hellcats were credited with destroying 5,223 aircraft while in service with the U.S. Navy, U.S. Marine Corps and the Royal Navy's Fleet Air Arm. This was more than any other Allied naval aircraft. Post-war, the Hellcat was phased out of frontline service, but remained in service as late as 1954 as a night fighter. Design and development, XF6F. Grumman had been working on a successor to the F4F Wildcat since 1938 and the contract for the prototype XF6F1 was signed on June 30, 1941. The aircraft was designed to use the Wright 2600 twin Cyclone 2-row, 14-cylinder radial engine of 1,700 HP driving a 3-bladed Curtiss electric propeller. Instead of the Wildcat's narrow-track, hand-cranked landing gear retracting into the fuselage, the Hellcat had wide-set, hydraulically actuated landing gear struts which rotated through 90 a degree while retracting backwards into the wings, much like that of the earlier Vought F4U Corsair. The wing was mounted lower on the fuselage and was able to be hydraulically or manually folded, with each panel outboard of the undercarriage bay folding backwards from pivoting on a specially oriented, Grumman patented diagonal axis pivoting system much like the earlier F4F, with a folded stowage position parallel to the fuselage with the leading edges pointing down. Throughout early 1942 Roy Grumman, along with his chief designers Jake Swerbel and Bill Schwindler, worked closely with the U.S. Navy's Bureau of Aeronautics and experienced F4F pilots, to develop the new fighter in such a way that it could counter the zero strengths and help gain air command in the Pacific theater of operations. On April 22, 1942, Lieutenant Commander Butch O'Hare toured the Grumman Aircraft Company and spoke with Grumman engineers, analyzing the performance of the F4F Wildcat against the Mitsubishi A6M0 in aerial combat. BU's Lieutenant CDRAM Jackson directed Grumman's designers to mount the cockpit higher in the fuselage. In addition, the forward fuselage sloped down slightly to the engine cowling, affording the Hellcat's pilot good visibility. Based on combat accounts of encounters between the F4F Wildcat and A6M0, on April 26, 1942, BU directed Grumman to install the more powerful 18-cylinder Pratt Whitney R-2800 double wasp radial engine in the second XF6F1 prototype. Grumman complied by redesigning and strengthening the F6F airframe to incorporate the 2,000 HP R-2800-10, driving a 3-bladed Hamilton standard propeller. With this combination Grumman estimated the XF6F3's performance would increase by 25% over that of the XF6F1. The Cyclone-powered XF6F1 first flew on June 26, 1942, followed by the first double wasp-equipped aircraft, the XF6F3, which first flew on July 30, 1942. The first production F6F3, powered by an R-2800-10, flew on October 3, 1942, with the type reaching operational readiness with VF9 on USAAF in February 1943. Further development. The F6F series were designed to take damage and get the pilot safely back to base. A bullet-resistant windshield and a total of 212 lb of cockpit armor was fitted, along with armor around the oil tank and oil cooler. A 250-gal self-sealing fuel tank was fitted in the fuselage. Standard armament on the F6F3 consisted of 6.50 in M2/AN Browning air-cooled machine guns with 400 rounds per gun. A center-section hardpoint under the fuselage could carry a single 150-gal disposable drop tank, while later aircraft had single bomb racks installed under each wing, inboard of the undercarriage bays. With these and the center-section hardpoint, late-model F6F3s could carry a total bomb load in excess of 2,000 lb. 6 5 and HVARs could be carried. 3 under each wing on zero-length launchers. 2 night fighter sub-variants of the F6F3 were developed. The 18 F6F3Es were converted from standard 3s and featured the ANAPS-4 radar in a pod mounted on a rack beneath the right wing, with a small radar scope fitted in the middle of the main instrument panel and radar operating controls installed on the port side of the cockpit. The later F6F3N, first flown in July 1943, was fitted with the ANAPS-6 radar in the fuselage, with the antenna dish in a bulbous fairing mounted on the leading edge of the outer right wing. Approximately 200 F6F3 nanoseconds were built. Hellcat night fighters claimed their first victories in November 1943. A total of 4,402 F6F3s were built through until April 1944, when production was changed to the F6F5. The F6F5 featured several improvements, including a more powerful A2800-10W engine, embodying a water injection system and housed in a slightly more streamlined engine cowling, spring-loaded control tabs on the ailerons, and an improved, clear-view windscreen, with a flat armored glass front panel replacing the F6F3's curved plexiglass panel and internal armored glass screen. In addition, the rear fuselage and tail units were strengthened, and, apart from some early production aircraft, the majority of the F6F5s built were painted in an overall glossy blue finish. After the first few F6F5s were built, the small windows behind the main canopy were deleted. The F6F5N night fighter variant was fitted with an ANAPS-6 radar in a fairing on the outer starboard wing. A small number of standard F6F5s were also fitted with camera equipment for reconnaissance duties as the F6F5P. While all F6F5s were capable of carrying an armament mix of 120 mm cannon in each of the inboard gun bays, along with 2 pairs of .50 in machine guns, this configuration was only used on later F6F5N night fighters. The F6F5 was the most common F6F variant, with 7,870 being built. Other prototypes in the F6F series included the XF6F4, which first flew on October 3, 1942 as the prototype for the projected F6F4. This version never entered production and 02981 was converted to an F6F3 production aircraft. Another experimental prototype was the XF6F2, an F6F3 converted to use a Reiter 2600-15, fitted with a Berman-manufactured mixed-flow turbocharger, which was later replaced by a Pratt Whitney R-2800-21, also fitted with a Berman turbocharger. The turbochargers proved to be unreliable on both engines, while performance improvements were marginal. As with the XF6F4, 66,244 was soon converted back to a standard F6F3. 2 XF6F6s were converted from F6F5s and used the 18-cylinder 2,100 HP Pratt Whitney R-2800-18W two-stage supercharged radial engine with water injection and driving a Hamilton standard 4-bladed propeller. The XF6F6s were the fastest version of the Hellcat series with a top speed of 417 mph, but the war ended before this variant could be mass-produced. The last Hellcat rolled out in November 1945, the total production being 12,275, of which 11,000 had been built in just 2 years. This high production rate was credited to the sound original design, which required little modification once production was underway. Operational history, U.S. Navy and Marines. The U.S. Navy much preferred the more docile flight qualities of the F6F compared with the Vought F4U Corsair, despite the superior speed of the Corsair. This preference was especially noted during carrier landings, a critical success requirement for the Navy, in which the Corsair was fundamentally flawed in comparison. The Corsair was thus released by the Navy to the Marine Corps, who, without the need to worry about carrier landings, used the Corsair to immense effect in land-based sorties. The Hellcat remained the standard USN carrier-borne fighter until the F4U series was finally cleared for U.S. carrier operations in late 1944. In addition to its good flight qualities, the Hellcat was easy to maintain and had an airframe tough enough to withstand the rigors of routine carrier operations. Like the Wildcat, the Hellcat was designed for ease of manufacture and ability to withstand significant damage. The Hellcat first saw action against the Japanese on September 1, 1943, when fighters off the USA Independence shot down a Cornish H-8K Emily flying boat. Soon after, on 23 and 24 November, Hellcats engaged Japanese aircraft over Tarawa, shooting down a claimed 30 Mitsubishi Zeros for the loss of one F6F. Over Rabaul, New Britain, on November 11, 1943, Hellcats and F4U Corsairs were engaged in day-long fights with many Japanese aircraft, including A6M Zeros, claiming nearly 50 aircraft. When trials were flown against a captured Zero Type 52, they showed that the Hellcat was faster at all altitudes. The F6F outclimbed the Zero marginally above 14,000 aft and rolled faster at speeds above 235 mph. The Japanese fighter could outturn its American opponent with ease at low speed and enjoyed a slightly better rate of climb below 14,000 aft. The trials report concluded. OE do not dogfight with a 052. Do not try to follow a loop or half-roll with a pull-through. When attacking, use your superior power and high-speed performance to engage at the most favorable moment. To evade a 052 on your tail, roll and dive away into a high-speed turn. Hellcats were the major U.S. Navy fighter type involved in the Battle of the Philippine Sea, where so many Japanese aircraft were shot down that Navy air crews nicknamed the battle the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. The F6F accounted for 75% of all aerial victories recorded by the U.S. Navy in the Pacific. Radar-equipped Hellcat night fighter squadrons appeared in early 1944. Sortie, kill and loss figures. U.S. Navy and Marine F6F pilots flew 66,530 combat sorties and claimed 5,163 kills at a recorded cost of 270 Hellcats in aerial combat. The aircraft performed well against the best Japanese opponents with a claimed 13-to-1 kill ratio against the A6M Zero, 9.51 against the Nakajima Ki-84, and 3.71 against the Mitsubishi J2M during the last year of the war. The F6F became the prime ace-maker aircraft in the American inventory, with 305 Hellcat aces. The U.S. successes were not only attributed to superior aircraft, but also from 1942 onwards, they faced increasingly inexperienced Japanese aviators as well as having the advantage of increasing numerical superiority. In the ground attack role, Hellcats dropped 6,503 tons of bombs. The U.S. Navy's all-time leading ace, Captain David Maycumble USN, scored all his 34 victories in the Hellcat. He once described the F6F as an outstanding fighter plane. It performed well, was easy to fly and was a stable gun platform. But what I really remember most was that it was rugged and easy to maintain. During the course of World War II, 2,462 F6F Hellcats were lost to all causes. 270 in aerial combat, 553 lost to anti-aircraft ground and shipboard fire, and 341 were lost to operational causes. Of the total figure, 1,298 were destroyed in training and ferry operations, normally outside of the combat zones. British use. The British Fleet Air Arm received 1,263 F6Fs under the Lend-Lease Act. Initially it was known as the Grumman Gannet Mark I. The name Hellcat replaced it in early 1943 for the sake of simplicity, the Royal Navy at that time adopting the use of the existing American naval names for all the U.S.-made aircraft supplied to it, with the F6F-3 being designated Hellcat FMKI, the F6F-5, the Hellcat FMK2 and the F6F-5N, the Hellcat NFMKII. They saw action off Norway, in the Mediterranean and in the Far East. A number were fitted with photographic reconnaissance equipment similar to the F6F-5P, receiving the designation Hellcat FRMKII. The Pacific War being a naval war, the FAA Hellcats primarily faced land-based aircraft in the European and Mediterranean theaters, and as a consequence experienced far fewer opportunities for air-to-air combat than their USN Marines counterparts. They claimed a total of 52 enemy aircraft kills during 18 aerial combats from May 1944 to July 1945. 1844 Naval Air Squadron, on board HMSA Indomitable of the British Pacific Fleet, was the highest-scoring unit, with 32.5 kills. FAA Hellcats, as with other Lend-Lease aircraft, were rapidly replaced by British aircraft after the end of the war, with only 2 of the 12 squadrons equipped with a Hellcat at VJ Day still retaining Hellcats by the end of 1945. These 2 squadrons were disbanded in 1946. Post-war, the Hellcat was succeeded by the F4F Wildcat, which was smaller, more powerful and more maneuverable, but entered service too late to see combat in World War II. The Hellcat was used for second-line USN duties, including training. In late 1952, Guided Missile Unit 90 used F6F-5K drones, each carrying a 2000 lb bomb, to attack bridges in Korea. Flying from USA Boxer, radio-controlled from an escorting AD Skyraider. The French copyright Ronavale was equipped with F6F-5 Hellcats and used them in Indochina. The Uruguayan Navy also used them until the early 1960s. The F6F-5 subtype also gained fame as the first aircraft used by the U.S. Navy's Blue Angels official flight demonstration team at its formation in 1946. Variants, XF-6F prototypes, XF-6F-1, first prototype, powered by a 2-stage 1,600 HP Writer 2600-10 Cyclone 14 radial piston engine. XF-6F-2, the first XF-6F-1 prototype revised and fitted with a turbocharged Writer 2600-16 Cyclone radial piston engine. R2600 replaced by turbocharged R2800-21. XF-6F-3 second prototype fitted with a 2-stage supercharged 2000 HP Pratt Whitney R-2800-10 Double Wasp radial piston engine. XF-6F-4, one F6F-3 fitted with a 2-speed turbocharged 2100 HP Pratt Whitney R-2800-27 Double Wasp radial piston engine. XF-6F-6, 2 F6F-5s that were fitted with a 2100 HP Pratt Whitney R-2800-18W radial piston engine, and 4-bladed propellers. Series production, F6F-3, single-seat fighter-bomber aircraft, powered by a 2000 HP Pratt Whitney R-2800-10 Double Wasp radial piston engine. F6F-3E, night fighter version, equipped with an ANAPS-4 radar inner fairing on the starboard outer wing. F6F-3N, another night fighter version, equipped with a newer ANAPS-6 radar inner fairing on the starboard outer wing. F6F-5 Hellcat, improved version, with a redesigned engine cowling, a new windscreen structure with an integral bullet-proof windscreen, new ailerons and strengthened tail surfaces. Powered by a 2200 HP Pratt Whitney R-2800-10W radial piston engine. F6F-5K Hellcat, a number of F6F-5s and F6F-5 nanoseconds were converted into radio-controlled target drones. F6F-5N Hellcat, night fighter version, fitted with an ANAPS-6 radar. Some were armed with two 20mm AN-M2 cannon in the inner wing bays and four 0.50 and M2 Browning machine guns in the outer. F6F-5P Hellcat, Small numbers of F6F5s were converted into photo reconnaissance aircraft, with the camera equipment being fitted in the rear fuselage. Hellcat FRMK2, this designation was given to British Hellcats fitted with camera equipment. FV1, proposed designation for Hellcats to be built by Canadian Vickers. Cancelled before any built. Operators, a France, French Navy, a United Kingdom, Royal Navy, a United States Navy, United States Marine Corps, a Uruguayan Navy. Survivors, a relatively large number of Grumman F6Fs are survivors either in museums or in flyable condition. In order of Buneau. They are, United Kingdom, airworthy. F6F5. 80,141, the fighter collection in Duford. On display. F6F5. 79,779, Fleet Air Arm Museum in RNAS Yeovilton. United States. Airworthy. F6F3. 41,930, Comanche Warbirds Incorporated in Houston, Texas. F6F5. 70,222, Commemorative Air Force at Camarillo Airport in Camarillo, California, 78645, Yanks Air Museum in Chino, California, 79863, Flying Heritage Collection in Everett, Washington, 94204, Lone Star Flight Museum in Galveston, Texas, 94473, Palm Springs Air Museum in Palm Springs, California. On display. F6F3. 25,910, National Naval Aviation Museum at NAS Pensacola in Pensacola, Florida, 41834, Stephen F. Voorhees Center of the National Air and Space Museum in Chantilly, Virginia, 42874, San Diego Aerospace Museum in San Diego, California, 66237, National Naval Aviation Museum at NAS Pensacola in Pensacola, Florida. F6F5. 70,185, Quonset Air Museum at Quonset State Airport in Quonset Point, Rhode Island, 77722, Joint Base Andrews Naval Air Facility at Andrews AFB in Maryland, 79192, New England Air Museum in Windsor Locks, Connecticut, 79593, USA Yorktown Patriots Point Naval and Maritime Museum in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, 79683, Air Zoo in Kalamazoo, Michigan, 94203, National Naval Aviation Museum at NAS Pensacola in Pensacola, Florida, 94263, Cradle of Aviation Museum in New York. It is on loan from the USMC Museum in Quantico, Virginia. Under restoration. F6F3. 40,467, for display at the Yanks Air Museum in Chino, California, 41476, to airworthiness by Collings Foundation in Stowe, Massachusetts, 43041, in storage at the Fantasy of Flight in Polk City, Florida. Specifications. Data from Quest for Performance, Genea Euro unregistered trademark S fighting aircraft of World War I standard aircraft characteristics, general characteristics, crew, 1, length, 33 feet 7 inches, wingspan, 42 feet 10 in, height, 13 feet 1 in, wing area, 334 FTA squared, airfoil, NACA 23015.6 mod route. NACA 23009 tip, empty weight, 9,238 pounds, loaded weight, 12,598 pounds, max takeoff weight, 15,415 pounds, powerplant, 1 Pratt Whitney R-2800-10W double WASP 2-row radial engine with a 2-speed 2-stage supercharger, 2,000 horsepower, propellers, 3-blade Hamilton standard, propeller diameter, 13 feet 1 in. Fuel capacity, 250 gallons internal. Up to 3 150 gallons external drop tanks, 0 lift drag coefficient, 0.0211, drag area, 7.05 FTA squared, aspect ratio, 5.5, performance, maximum speed, 330 kn, stall speed, 73 kn, combat radius, 820 mi, ferry range, 1,313 mi, service ceiling, 37,300 feet, rate of climb, 3,500 feet per minute, wing loading, 37.7 pounds FTA squared, power mass, 0.16 horsepower per pound, time to altitude, 7.7 minutes to 20,000 feet, lift to drag ratio, 12.2, takeoff roll, 799 feet, armament, guns, either 6er, 0.50 and M2 Browning machine guns, with 400 rounds per gun, or 2er, 0.79 and cannon, with 225 rounds per gun, and 4er, 0.50 in Browning machine guns with 400 rounds per gun. Rockets, 6er, 5 in HVARs or 2er, 11 3/4 in Tiny Tim unguided rockets. Bombs, up to 4,000 pounds full load, including bombs or torpedoes, fuselage mounted on centerline rack, 1er, 2,000 pounds bomb or 1er, Mk13-3 torpedo. Underwing bombs, 2er, 1,000 pounds or 4er, 500 pounds, 8er, 250 pounds. See also, David May Campbell, the top U.S. Navy ace of World War II with all of his 34 victories in the Hellcat, commander of Air Group 15 during World War II and recipient of the Medal of Honor. Eugene A. Valencia, Jr., top scoring ace of VF9 during World War II with 23 victories while flying Hellcats. Alexander Brassou, who had 19 victories on Hellcats flying with VF6 and VF16 during World War II. Related development, Grumman F4F Wildcat, Grumman F8F Barcat, aircraft of comparable role, configuration and era, Nakajima Ki 84, Kawanishi N1K, Mitsubishi A7M, Vought F4U Corsair. Related lists, list of aircraft of World War II, list of fighter aircraft, list of aircraft of the United States during World War II, list of aircraft of the Fleet Air Arm, references, notes. Citations. Bibliography. External links, WW2DB, F6F Hellcat, Final Flight Test Report of F6F3, USN Air Station, Patuxent River, F6F Hellcat Performance Trials, Aircraft and Armament Experimental Establishment, Boscombe Down, Performance Test, each 1, 0th Aircraft. F6F5 No 58310, USN Air Station, Patuxent River, USN and USMC Aircraft Serial and Bureau Nose 1911 to present, How the Hellcat Got That Way, Popular Science, December 1943, World War II article which is large and detailed.